Welcome, everyone, to our panel entitled Beyond Fantasy, Portraying Real-World Cultures and Religions in Tabletop Gaming. Even though we will be talking mostly specifically about tabletop games in particular, the information we will talk about tonight is definitely relevant for any writers, authors, game designers. It can be applied to filmmaking, etc. So definitely there's stuff to be learned here. I am joined by 5 wonderful people from the tabletop games community. I'm gonna have them all introduce themselves in a second. Yes, I am Nala. I'm going to be your moderator-ish for tonight. And who would like to go first? If you could just share your name, your pronouns, and tell us about yourself and what you do, that would be awesome.
I can go. I'll go first.
Steve,
I love going first.
Who are
you?
Everyone.
Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for having me on this panel. I'm very excited. My name is Steve Wen. I am a tabletop RPG writer. I recently was published in the Unbreakable anthology, which was a whole bunch of D&D 5e one-shot adventures, all written and illustrated by Asian-identified folks. It's great. I had a lot of fun doing it. Very, very enlightening for me and very impactful for me personally. But you can also catch me on the Asians Represent podcast. I'm one of the cast and crew members, part of the podcast, and also doing some of the streaming there as well. So I try to keep myself as involved as I possibly can with these types of communities and try my best to help raise up voices.
Heck yeah. All right, who wants to go next?
I can go next.
Hey.
Go ahead.
All right, Bashir, you go, and then Connie will go.
Hey, I'm Bashir Gauss. I am a cultural consultant, freelance writer, and indie game designer in the tabletop RPG industry. I've worked with a whole mess of companies, Kobold Press, Paizo, Rowan, Rook, and Deckard, and more besides, though I don't remember which ones I can talk about at the moment. I'm not going to give an exhaustive list. To a degree, the stuff that we're talking about here today is part of my day job. And I also do some streaming. I'm on Kahanion with Connie and Mariam, who are going to introduce themselves at some point. That
no,
is
Bashir,
me.
I want you to list out every single project you've done, and then after an hour and a half, we'll say goodnight.
All right. Who'd like to go next?
I can take that. So hi everyone, my name is Connie. My pronouns are they, he, and she. Nowadays, I am the GM and executive producer behind Transplanar RPG, which is an all transgender, people of color led, 100% homebrew, Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition live stream actual play campaign set in an original non-colonial anti-Orientalist world. So I'm very excited to be part of this panel. I also have a degree in screenwriting and critical race studies, and I have done some work in Hollywood. So I can speak toward that as well. And yeah, that's who I am. Oh, I also do a lot of improv comedy stuff. I'm excited to bring that perspective into this chat. And I guess I can pass introductions. I'm also like a cast member on like a bunch of stuff that I can list out right now. But I think that's a good segue for Miriam, perhaps, to introduce himself.
Yeah, thank you. Also, I have to say, just with the mic and everything, it's like I get this huge like radio vibes. Like
Connie Shaw from NPR reporting live.
You know that Connie, Jack, and Steve are professionals because of the gamer chairs, obviously.
Oh yeah, that's the bar.
Yeah.
My chair is across the thing because I have a nice, comfortable butt chair and a nice, comfortable back chair, and my back chair is the gaming chair.
Understandable.
Hi, everybody. I am Mariam. I go by they, them pronouns. I write for stuff. I stream. I do podcasts. I do quite a few things. And I am not as professional as everyone else here. Excuse me.
You're amazing.
So I've written for Paizo, Evil Hat, and a couple of indie RPGs, Kickstarters. I am the GM creator for the Musafirs podcast, which is a South Asian actual play podcast. It was in D&D 5e, but we're moving away from that for season 2. And I am also a caretaker sort of admin for Utopia, which is a Twitch streaming all BIMPOC for BIMPOC channel, which many of the panelists are on, and if you're not, I can send you a link.
You should get on Utopia. It's great.
And I am the GM for Kahania, which is also another South Asian actual play, which is all based on Sarzamin, the campaign setting I'm writing. Whew. That's me.
Heck yeah.
Well, I am not a professional. I think I'm the one that's not as professional as everyone else, because I haven't written anything, but I have a lot of experience in playing games and with people. I play in a bunch of different streams, different channels. I won't list all of them because I'll be honest, I can't remember all of them. But I'm also the co-founder and the event organizer of another TTRPG Twitch channel called Friends Who Roll Dice. And I'm in charge of getting guests on, setting up charity events, stuff like that. I am working on some projects behind the scenes that will hopefully be out soon, and I can actually talk about them. And then I have a very exhaustive list of things to list out. But for now, I am a TTRPG addict with a decent amount of experience and a passion for proper representation, which is why I was actually very excited to be part of this panel.
Thank you all so
Drac,
much
can you
for
see him
being
pronouns,
here.
by the way? Yeah.
Thank you all so much for being here. I appreciate it so much. And for those of you who don't know who I am, like I said, I'm Nala. Jay is also a name I go by. I use they, them pronouns, and I draw stuff. And yeah, and I'm the events coordinator for Gamers Guild at the Savannah College of Art and Design. And the rest of the lovely people watching here are our club members. Our club is pretty cool. I don't know. I don't know what else to say. Zeke, do you want to tell the panelists a little bit about our club if you want to? I'm sorry to put you on the spot.
What? Oh, hello. Hi, I'm here. I mean, Gamers Guild is pretty cut and dry. Just a club at the Savannah campus of SCAD where people can come together over their love of TTRPGs, board games, card games, really anything tabletop. We do it. We love it.
Yeah.
We love to see it.
It's a lot of nerds.
Yeah,
that has made it really hard for us to keep together, but we've been trying to do digital events, and we got our Discord server and whatnot, and we're trying our best here, and we're a bunch of art kids. We love games, and I'm very excited to get this panel underway. If y'all don't mind, I think we should just dive right into it. We have our first question here, which was sent in by a member of our club. And the question reads as follows. What is a thorough and respectful way to incorporate historical Japanese cultural elements into a campaign setting? I know that this is a question that at least I see discussed on the Twitter sphere a lot. And it's something that we as a club have tried to discuss before, but with just me and the limited view of my own stuff, I haven't been able to fully share all the resources. I mean, I've directed everyone to Asians Represent, honestly, because I know that you guys talk about it a lot, and I'm like, go watch that. They're way smarter than me. they say things a lot more not concisely, but they say things a lot they're more educated and they have a lot more information. But yeah, this question.
To add to that, just because I want to get on the Steve love train, for critical reads Al-Qadim, which I am a part of, which focuses on the Al-Qadim setting. We start every episode quoting your tweet about and now my brain completely blanks out because I'm listening, but it was the tweet that was on the lines of essentially, if you want to use certain content, and it turns out to be incredibly racist or add ism in it, it doesn't mean you're a bad person. And I think since you wrote the tweet, you might be able to kind of finish that thought.
Yeah, I think, speaking on this panel, the way I would express it is obviously everyone who's come here to listen, whether it's live or, catching it asynchronously, you might have had these ideas and you might have these really good intentions, and having good intentions and trying to do good things makes you a good person. You might be causing harm. The impact might be not what you expected, but I'm not here. None of us are here to tell anyone that you're a bad person or that you're a racist or you're a bigot or things like that. The purpose, of course, of this panel is to continue the conversation, to help you build the tools, build the vocabulary and all that good stuff so that you can re-examine, deconstruct any potential harm you may have or will cause and think about it in a more critical way, in a more nuanced way. That doesn't fit in a tweet, unfortunately. So, but that's the idea behind it.
So what do y'all recommend? I guess if we could start from the research side. So if somebody wants to run a campaign set in feudal Japan or another historical Japanese setting, what do y'all recommend as far as getting started with research and that kind of thing if they want to take on that sort of campaign setting?
So the common issues you're going to run into in porting any historical setting kind of outside of your milieu or the milieu you're used to is exoticization, accidentally running into racist stereotypes and the like because you weren't aware of something or because you're not thinking critically about something, and in treating cultures of color and cultures you aren't familiar with differently, and especially in negative ways than ones you're more familiar with. So to a degree, everyone here's familiar to some extent with how ancient Greece might be brought into a fantasy setting or a role-playing game. And while you've almost certainly seen equivalents to that try to use feudal Japan, the problem they often run into is treating feudal Japan as either this unique, exotic place filled with things that people couldn't understand and people who fundamentally act differently to the sorts of people you're familiar with. And in adopting that setting to what you're doing and what you're using in a way different than you would adopt Greece or Europe or settings like that. Part of it is when you get into, so in terms of red flags, there's stuff if you have decided that the way to adapt this is by adding an honor score to your game, do not do that. That's very easy. But the harder part is that there's a long set of guidelines and approaches that you're going to need to be looking at that are a bit more difficult than just do this, don't do that. That's broader than just historical Japanese elements, but it's in my view and in my profession kind of the core of the problem I run into when dealing with that sort of attempt. So I'm sure other people have things to weigh in with, but my general advice is consider how are you adapting elements of other historical periods and their cultural elements to your setting. So if you're people like samurai, people bring samurai in, and using the aesthetic is not on its own an issue, but the problem comes in when you go all in on honor and the racist tropes that accompany that, where when you port in knights, for example, you generally get something with a lot more internal nuance or internal differentiation, just because people are familiar with knights and treat them as normal people rather than this special thing from somewhere else.
You'll see. No, Connie, please go ahead.
Sure. Just sort of going off of that, I have a lot of thoughts about a lot of these things. I think the first one, I have a counter question, which is a question about the context of this situation. If this is for a home game where the GM, presumably you, are white and all your players are white, I think that's different from a situation where it's a home game where you are a white GM and you're GMing a bunch of like Japanese folks or like people of color, or if you are a GM of color but you're not Japanese, or if you are a GM of color and you are Japanese. You know, I think the context of this really matters a lot. And, you know, it changes if it's a streamed game or if you want to make this into a podcast too. Because straight up, like my answer is, if you want to make this into a stream or podcast, like, and you're white and most of your players are white, don't do it. But we have a bit more flexibility, I think, when it comes to a home game. And I think Bashir brings up a lot of great points. For example, in my world, I base a lot of the different nations off of various real world cultures, and I'm very upfront and transparent about that. And one of the first things I look at when doing research into a culture that isn't my own isn't like the history, you know, it isn't like the war, you know, or whatever. I look at like the food and the dance, you know. I look at like, what do like regular ass people interact with, you know, what kind of music, you know, is prevalent during that era. And I try to be very specific with my time period. I'm like, oh, well, let's just say 900s to 1400s. That's like hundreds of years. Like I try to focus on a very specific time period. That way I can get as like nuanced and like granular as possible, because I think a lot of the problem that arises, you know, when representing a culture other than yourself is painting it in broad strokes, or like, you know, the worst sin of sins in like that fucking D&D supplement with like it's called Oriental Adventures. All Asians are the same is like the subtitle of that book. It's like they mashed so many different cultures together, and I'm like, what is this supposed to represent? So like that's like the last thing you want, right? But yeah, Steve, did you have something that you wanted to say?
Yeah, I wanted to bring on or hone into one of your points you made, Connie, about like focusing on art and dance and all these ways that people express themselves, because it really speaks to our identity. But I do want to go off a tangent and actually talk about history, because part of the question is historical, you know, research and things like that. And I want to very clearly say that researching history is not a silver bullet. It is not a magic bullet. You could research history forever and you will still miss things. And that is because history itself is a medium that is pervaded by oppression and prejudices, even if the people who are doing the professionals doing it don't know. So Not Asian Represent, one of our cast members, one of the regulars, when we went and did a critical read of Legend of the Five Rings, she was a Japanese archaeologist. She is a Japanese archaeologist. And she was saying a lot of the stuff where, look, a lot of people who actually did the research and got it published and whatnot were white people who didn't understand anything and were just like making stuff up and trying to fill in gaps without actually consulting with people who identified with this stuff and had that history, but in their context. So they missed a whole lot of stuff, and that perpetuated harm. In addition, they came into their work and they began publishing things, not realizing, not deconstructing their own biases. So they had preconceived notions of what they thought Japan was like in the past. And then they did the very natural but harmful thing humans do, where they try to connect the dots of like their own prejudice and the stereotypes they have with the evidence they're presented with. And that causes a lot of harm sometimes. So you see these things where, you know, like Oriental Adventures, you get like this weird pastiche because they have these stereotypes that are like deeply rooted in like maybe the way they viewed Chinese immigrants, and now have begun to like muddle those with Japanese stereotypes. And what they've done now is they've created like this horrible monster of harm. And it's a bad look. Don't do that.
Oriental Adventures bad.
This is a takeaway.
That's what we should name the panel.
Yeah.
I just want to build off of all that's been said already, of that. Yeah, history has its own issues. And this is me as a South Asian trying to write a South Asian campaign setting and going through all sorts of sources which have been influenced by essentially British colonialism. And in fact, like, you know, they're the saying that history is written by the victor, which means you never get the person who was conquered side of the story, if ever. And like, for I can't speak too much about Japanese history, except for the fact that I know there were quite a few crimes done by by imperial factions that are not British. And then similarly in South Asian history, you have cultures that have dominated and have done atrocities but are native to the area. And that's one thing. And then the other thing is that especially when we're looking at honor, and we're talking from whether it's Oriental Adventures or even Al-Qadim, and I'm not going to rehash that because it's like there's like almost, I think, maybe 20 hours you can go through in VOD for the Al-Qadim stream. But the sort of TLDR of it is that a lot of times when you see honor being represented, especially when it's done in this is new, this is exotic, this is their particular brand of honor, more often than not, it's a reflection of European medieval ideas of honor than actual sort of, again, Al-Qadim is this weird mishmash of Pan-Arab, North African, Persian, South Asian things, and it's just this, like, more often than not, when I read all these things about honor in specific, because that's the one that keeps getting brought up over and over again, I see Crusader and European sort of paladin chivalry honor being slapped across it with a weird Pan-Arab paintbrush. And honor, on the other hand, is a very different thing if you look at the individual cultures, and has more often than not nothing to do with what is and what ends up being written.
I don't know if I can add anything else, honestly, to what everyone else said, but I do want to go back to what Connie mentioned about narrowing down to a specific time period and location, because I think that's obviously people already said that, but I think that's the biggest issue with when most people are trying to have a campaign or game in a historical context. They mishmash things that realistically were hundreds of years apart and make it all just one almost beige equivalent of a beige history. Like everything is just mishmashed together. And I think that's where, believe it or not, that's where I've seen the most, whether it's accidental or purposeful racism in most representations of feudal Japan, or honestly just any non-European country and culture. So like, I think a really key way to do is definitely zone in on this what everyday people do, because if you just look at the history is going to be, most people only write down the history that is extreme. No one really cares about the everyday man or everyday person in history. And so if you make every single person in your world that extreme, whether it's extremely bad, extremely positive, wherever end of the spectrum, it ends up being honestly accidentally harmful to the people you're probably trying to actually represent. You're probably trying to actually do good by these people, but by doing it in that way, you're doing a lot more harm than good. So yeah, zoom in on a specific decade. If you can zoom in even further than that to a specific year, that's even better, because then because even between like a year or two, there are often huge changes in different cultures. And
I mean, look at us. Like 2020 changed
exactly
our entire society.
Yeah.
For better or for worse. But I and like people say this all the time, but I don't think I don't think we're ever going to go back to how it was before. I think this has been a monumental historical change in our society, and it's only been like a year at this point.
Exactly.
Another thing, and I'm just speaking generally here, another thing to just consider is like, why do you want to set your game in that particular spot? Like, ask yourself, why are you interested in that? And like to start like thinking about that, I think can also help tackle like, are you actually interested in ancient Japan, or is there specific elements that you're more drawn to that you can pull out and do something different with it, if that makes sense? We also directed, in general, if you're looking up historical things, try to find stuff written by Japanese people, because that's usually going to be far more accurate than whatever like some Dr. Brenda White person's gonna have to say about it. Yeah, that's about all I have to add on to this.
This might cross into one of the other questions that has been brought up, but one of the things that's worth considering is most I'm not going to make assumptions about what system you're planning to do this for, but most games that you would be trying to do a medieval Japanese thing in aren't using a straight port of actual European history, right? So like if you look at any setting you really care, like any fantasy setting that you would care to name, what you have for your European setting isn't like, here's medieval Europe as it was in X year, but you have kind of, here's a pastiche of things we like brought together from across like 1,000 years of history and then whitewashed a lot to make it palatable to modern audiences. Because, you know, the murders, and the plague and the starvation and all the other stuff. And when you're bringing in a new thing from outside of that area, I would be wary of sticking too close to the actual history with all the nitty gritty, especially if you're not planning to include if you're using a pre-existing thing. Try to keep whatever you're porting in tonally consistent with the setting you're portraying outside of that area.
And I want to add to that, basically when, you know, the question of why do you want to play in ancient Japan? And if the answer is because I saw this one movie and I thought it was super cool, that's okay. Like I am not going to judge people for what answer they give to that question, but I would also then say, but why this particular movie? And it's like, oh, I like the tone of it. And it's like, okay, so what is the tone? Is there a genre? It's like, oh yeah, it's closer to like the Westerns. I like the Westerns of like the lone stranger walking into this town. And it's like, okay, so you like this particular like, you know, genre of Westerns,
like
of like the borderlands and whatever. It's like, well, you could also play Star Wars and you would get the same feeling. You could play like, it's one of those things where when I say this, I don't say it to dissuade you of playing. It's just really think about why you want to play it. And if the answer is, well, actually, come to think of it, I liked it from this movie and whatever, but what I really want to play is like this sort of lawless Western thing. And it's like, okay, well, you can play that. You can certainly play it in ancient Japan, but are you playing it because it was coincidental that the movie you liked was set in ancient Japan and you really want to play Westerns? Or is it that, no, I actually want to play in ancient Japan? And that might then further aid you in your discussion of why and what you want to play.
Awesome. Unless anyone else has anything else to add, I would like to move on to the next topic.
I could literally talk about this question for like another hour, but I won't. But what I do want to say a couple of things explicitly, because we went like very quickly over a lot of concepts here, and I'm not going to try to summarize because everyone spoke very, very well. And if you missed it, you should absolutely rewind and just watch it again. But a couple of things I want to say very explicitly are, one, I'm one of the people that believe that Asian stories don't have to be told by Asian people. I think Asian stories are stories and they can be told by all people. So if that is something you are afraid of, and this comes from me trying to coddle a lot of like white fragility out there, because I try us to be very gentle and patient with that, because y'all are people out there. You can tell Asian stories, like that's totally fine, but you have to be very careful and, to this question's credit, respectful. But if you go back and you watch everything that everyone said, you'll see there's a lot of nuance and a lot of like time taken to like dissect the question. And that's because the question itself touched on so many different things that we probably don't have time to go into. So for example, you asked, what is a thorough way? Well, what does thorough mean? Like, what do you mean by thorough? What do you mean by respectful? What do you mean by historical, Japanese, cultural elements? Like, we could spend time just talking about those individual words and what they could possibly mean. But at the end of the day, everything that everyone has said here, and I apologize for speaking for his behalf, is a challenge to deconstruct what you think that question is asking and really, really reflect on what you're asking and why you're asking it.
Thank you.
Can I just very quickly, like, I'm sorry. Like, I just want to like say something really fast.
Go ahead. Yep.
First of all, Steve, I applaud your patience. I like really do. Like, I really do not have that. You know, like my tolerance for like white fragility has run out. Like so much, like so long ago. But you know, my parting words. That was all great. Is you know, sort of going off what Bashir just said. Like, find a system made by like a Japanese person. Or like a Japanese team and play in a setting made by Japanese people. You know, I think Ryutama is like a tabletop game that's been translated into English, made by like a Japanese team. Like, check out that system. It's super cool. Instead of focusing on violence, it focuses on nature. You know, that's like another great part about it. So yeah, I'd say go ahead.
Oh, would you mind just typing that in the chat?
Yes, I will. And that's
I do not know how to spell that.
Ryutama is a really good game.
Yeah, Ryutama is pretty neat.
For those people watching later, it is Ryuutama.
I just, you know, the work that you're trying to do, I guarantee you someone else out there who is Japanese has already done it and it's out there. You know, I implore you to find it. Yep.
Make your life easier. Someone's probably already done the work.
Definitely. That's all.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. The next question kind of goes off stuff that we've already talked about a little bit, but like, say someone like has messed up and you notice it. What is the best way to resolve issues arising from bad or inaccurate or offensive portrayals of cultures in games? And I think this is more directed at like people who have realized they've messed up, but like, what is the best way to sort of like move forward? Or even just like, if you as a player realize that another player or your GM has done something that's not great, like how do you recommend bringing this up to the table and talking about it?
So I actually have personal experience with this in a home game. I was like midway through running a plot with a bunch of ghouls and stuff, looked at my notes and realized, wait a minute, that looks a lot like blood libel. I need to rethink this. And I just straight up had a conversation by table like, hey, we didn't get to it yet, but there was some dire shit in the next couple of sessions that I am currently rewriting. We're like, can we delay the next session by a couple days? And we'll get back here's like kind of the outline of what I was doing. And we'll get back to it whenever. To some degree, what you need to do changes based on how public you are. I'm kind of assuming this question is aimed at home games rather than like podcasts or anything. So
I think most people in this club are running home games within the club. I think some people are looking to start like podcasting and whatnot, but generally most of the things we're talking about are home games.
All right. So the first thing I would note is that don't be afraid to retcon. Sometimes you pick this up late enough that you just kind of want to go, hey, here's what happened. Here's the stuff that was pretty bad. We're just going to go back and change this up. And if that got kind of involved, you might want to talk about it, or you might want to figure out like, how are we going to recontextualize this in the next couple of sessions, ideally as soon as possible. And then kind of just have a conversation, be honest with the table about what went wrong and what you would like to change. If this is like a player is doing something and you need to have a conversation with them, I would probably have the initial conversation privately if possible.
Call in and call out.
Yeah.
Lauren, would you mind explaining, or anyone, but could we get just a brief explanation of the difference between a call-in and a call-out for people who don't know?
Sure. So a call-in is when you have a conversation with the person who you need to have a conversation with. And it's more private. It's kind of hey, I noticed such and such happened, and this is how I feel about it, or this is what I'm like, this is what I think it is, and I would like you to work on it, or like basically it's a call out, but more privately done. And a call out is essentially most likely publicly calling someone out on something they have done wrong or bad, which is most of Twitter.
If you can dodge all that stuff, Twitter's a great place.
And to segue into this particular question from my perspective is, it's honestly it's pretty similar to any time you mess up in general. Of if you're the one who messed up, do not be defensive. Like, try to give yourself room to listen, and do not dismiss that person's concerns, the person who came to you, because if they've come to you, they actually have some faith and belief in you to have this conversation. Otherwise, they could have easily just not spoken to you. And more often than not, if you are not hearing anything from anyone and people essentially ghost you or disappear, they don't feel comfortable telling you something's gone wrong. So if someone's having that conversation with you, that means that they have enough trust in you to have that conversation. So take that to heart when you might feel defensive, and be like, but I didn't mean to. And it doesn't matter if that is the case. When you say that to someone else, you're basically telling them, yeah, but... And so it's basically a don't be defensive, try to listen because someone's come to you, and apologize sincerely and work on fixing it.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I also think this is the thing that I feel like every game should have, whether it's on stream or off stream, whether it's a home game or podcast or actual play, live stream, is I think safety tools are very important. And I think a lot of people seem to think that you only use safety tools when you are like going through distress, but it's honestly just for anything that goes wrong. So like even if you yourself are feeling fine, but you notice like your GM just used a very racist stereotype as an NPC. It might not be from your culture, but if you acknowledge that, you can just do an X card and have them pause the game and speak to them about that. Because I think I think it was Banana Chan. They were running a game for young kids. They showed us a video. It was very cute, but it was that they have to. It's adorable. But the thing was that they gave them, unlike most games where they say, here's an X card, use it if you want. Banana Chan said, here's an X, N, and O card. You have to use each one of these at least once in the game. And like telling them that you can use it whenever, telling them you have to use it whenever makes it feel less taboo to use it. Telling them that like it ends up becoming a mission. Every time you feel like, okay, this person looks uncomfortable, I'm going to use the O question mark card to check if they're okay. Like it incentivizes that, and as a result will make these kind of conversations a lot easier and a lot more natural to have. Because if you're able to talk to someone about, hey, that character was a bit weird for me, it would be, and then being able to build up from that, it would make it much easier for you to be like, hey, that character a bit racist or a bit stereotypical or anything like that. It makes it a lot easier to approach people in that way.
I definitely agree.
Yeah, I have a bit more experience in just streaming specifically, and I think those are most likely the best ways to combat that without like breaking the flow, without calling them out on stream. I definitely agree with Miriam doing the call in first. A lot of people don't realize it. I guarantee most people, I like to have the benefit of the doubt, but I guarantee most people aren't horrible. So they're probably doing it by accident. So calling them out instantly will, unfortunately, but naturally cause them to become defensive instantly. But if you at least approach them privately, away from prying eyes, they should hopefully be able to be more able to listen and apologize sincerely and change whatever was an offense in the first place.
Yeah, I would definitely add, like, definitely increasing the frequency of having these conversations, no matter how big or small, like that, like even for small things, will make everyone at your table a lot more comfortable when and if something larger or more problematic happens. I safety tools, I'm sure this club is tired of hearing me talk about them because every panel I'm like, safety tools, here's what they are. Safety tools, use them, love them. Communication's the most important thing is like the takeaway from like every panel I do for this club. Communication is key. But another safety tool, which I haven't specifically talked about because I hadn't, like I've used it without knowing like the actual word for it. But basically, like safety tools are something you can do at the beginning of your game, during your game, and after your game. It's something you can do in prep. It's something you do like throughout. It's not just something you do once and then you're over with. But something that I highly recommend at the end of your games, you may have done this at like summer camp. It's called Thorns and Roses, where you ask your players for something they liked during the game and something they weren't a fan of. And it can be something as little as, you know, I want to go shopping more. And maybe the GM's like, oh, well, you know, yeah, let's waste an hour on shopping. Sure. But if the players are having fun, let's do it. And like, but that's like a great way as a GM to get feedback after every session. Like, tell me something you liked, tell me something you didn't like. Thorns and Roses. But like even just like having that practice of asking your players, what is something I could have done better? Or like, what is something that went wrong or something you didn't like during this session? And even if they say, no, everything was fine, letting that be open and letting your players give you criticism will help increase the frequency of those harder conversations. And then I think everyone at your table will be far more comfortable if something actually really terrible were to happen.
Aftercare.
Aftercare. Yeah.
I wanted to address this question kind of in a different direction because everyone said amazing things that I just like +1 to everything. But how you come across the situation, I think, is also important. We've already talked at length about being told by a person at your table, like, hey, I have a problem and like I'd like to resolve it. And everyone gave great advice about that. But in this 2021, this can actually come up in a lot of different ways, and I did want to touch on those.
Of course.
So another way this could happen is you read an article and you realize that it might be something you've done in your game could be problematic. #problematic. So like, what do you do from there? And my advice to you would be really sit in that discomfort for a while, like really just like sit there. Then make the personal judgment, because it's going to be super contextual of whether or not you bring it to your group and how you do it. It's going to be completely case by case, depending on the people. But you might come across like, you know what, I'm not going to bring it up because it's going to cause a lot of problems and everyone's having good, status quo is okay, and it's a home game and we're not, if there is harm, at least it's contained. Or maybe you're like, hey, everyone, I read this article. Here it is in your Discord. Please read it. I think I want to change this in the game. And then you can have a conversation. Another way this might happen is more of like the call out thing. So like you post something on Twitter and someone's like, this is actually hella problematic and like, you shouldn't do this. And again, that's going to cause like tension within you. That's going to make you uncomfortable. And again, sit in that discomfort. It sucks, but I promise it's good for your soul. But sit in that discomfort and just try to understand where it might be coming from. And then go do something else for a little, then come back and then decide how, again, you want to approach that. Because one option is to not engage them on Twitter, which valid. Don't do that every single time. Another option is to ask very specific questions for clarity and then thank them for their time, because they have clearly put some energy into this, and begging them more energy is maybe not the route you want to go, because that is a type of privilege. And again, that is something we're here to say needs to be deconstructed for everyone, all of the panelists included. Everyone has to do this.
100%. Does anyone have any closing thoughts about this topic? All good? Awesome. Cool. I want to switch gears and talk about, these are like two questions. I'd like to try to get to both of them. And there's one question for the end that I think would be a great wrap-up question. I think we talked a little bit in a previous panel about accents, and I would just love to get everyone else's opinions on this. And I put this topic in here again because it was brought up at a previous panel, and of course, like there's limited POC in our club, unfortunately, and I would love to hear everyone else's opinions. But the topic generally was like, is it okay to do accents, or is that something to avoid? And question we had gotten, like, why are accents like Scottish or British accents like seen as okay, but doing like an Arabic or Chinese accent is offensive, even if it's accurate? Like that, basically, like, should you just flat out not do any accents, or are some accents okay, and why are some okay and why are some aren't? And generally what we talked about is just like stereotypes of accents is something you really want to avoid, because that is extremely harmful to people. A lot of like cartoons that use stereotypical like Indian accents or whatever for their characters, like that's all like a please don't. And how I've always explained it, because I think I got this question on Twitter once, like I was saying like the general European accents, like English dialects or Scottish or Russian, German, like all of those seem to be up for grabs, as like it's not as bad, I think, because I really don't know the answers for like why, other than like they're white people. It's white accents versus
That's
like,
the answer. It's a false equivalency.
Is like millions of dead bodies. But
yeah,
the longer answer is that there's a lot of cultural stuff that goes into an accent that often the issues people take with when someone's doing an accent is the cultural factors that have gone into the accent they have picked, occasionally without them really thinking about it. So like the stereotypical Indian accent, that's kind of first generation immigrant older uncle. You're not going to hear that from anyone under like 40 in the US, for example. It's a pretty specific part of India and like Indian culture.
And most Hollywood actors have been told to ham up their natural accent.
Yeah. What you're hearing as like a natural accent for this area probably isn't like decent odds. And the reason people get criticized for their accents, generally speaking, is when those play into a stereotype or exacerbate it or make it seem make a character who may otherwise be fine seem part of the stereotype. Whereas like the entire thing with Apu, the accent might not be great if he wasn't also all these other stereotypical things, but there wouldn't be as much of a complaint as there was considering literally everything else about the character Apu. So technically my answer is you can use an accent. You should be really careful about it and what you're actually saying by using that accent. In practice, my answer is don't use that accent because it probably doesn't say what you think it says.
Yeah, Bashir, my answer is don't do it. I'm just gonna draw that line right there. Don't fucking do it. Because straight up, like Bashir, you put this like really eloquently, like straight up, it's a false equivalency. It's like, why is it okay for, why are white people racist, but you say people of color can't be racist against white people? It's a false equivalency. Like why it's so many of these questions can be answered very simply because it's a false equivalency. There's none of that history of like institutional like racism, like the Orientalism, the imperialist and colonialist history. None of that is saturated in like a German accent. None of that is because these are like white majority countries, right? Like Germany, Dutch, like Scotland, Britain, and there are like people of color in these countries, but that isn't tied, like the othered race isn't tied to the accent in like the cultural milieu.
Sorry to push back a little bit, but like with Welsh accents is one I know of, is like they're white people, but there is occasionally baggage attached to that accent, and it's because of stereotypes tied into a lot of pretty horrible stuff that's happened to the Welsh.
I hear you for sure. And it does make me feel a certain way when like white British people put on like a white, like an Irish accent to make fun of like Irish people. Like that also feels like
accents.
That feels
Russian for that matter.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of Russian accents tap into like the Red Scare, like a lot of like Cockney accents tap into hatred for like, I don't know, like poor people or rural people, but I'm not sure if those are necessarily. Yeah, exactly. I don't know if those are inherently racialized though.
It's not the same.
Not inherently racialized. No.
Being as like doing a really bad Chinese accent.
Not. Yeah, exactly. I also want to like.
Same thing.
This question is so interesting because like, what is the meta context of this accent in your game? Do you have like a fantasy China that these people are from? So they're speaking in a fantasy Chinese accent? Do only Tabaxi have Chinese accents? Does that mean Tabaxi are stand-ins for Chinese people in your game? Like, this is such an interesting question because it reveals so many things about your world, I think, that are just kind of like carelessly put into it, So like, I don't know. I've like seen the whole like the meme like on Twitter of like, oh, all my elves have British accents. Why? Probably because like they're like, British accents are posh, and I'm like, first of all, which British accent?
Yeah, okay, first of all, as a Brit.
Yeah, I know, Drac.
Take it away.
Okay, so I to most people, for some reason, I sound posh. I promise you, literally, I've talked about it a bunch of times already. Someone got stabbed outside of my apartment, and that's just normal. Like, I am not from an area that's posh, but because people just and it applies to like so many different accents, but people seem to attach one thing to an entire accent and make it that. Like what you said, Connie, how all elves have British accents. First of all, that's not how accents work in the first place. A race doesn't have an accent. is where you're from. So that just straight like, and it's so like that. I feel like personally that's the main issue with people who want to use accents. They end up attaching it to a race instead of a place, and on top of that, they end up attaching some extra meaning to the accent of that place or of that race. I personally, I don't do accents because I'm bad at them, but I don't think you need to do accents. Like, if you say that they are from this country, this fantasy country, just say they have this fantasy accent. You don't need to interpret it. You don't have to do it yourself. Just say that from the way they're speaking, you can tell they're from this part of the country. They're from this part of the world. You don't need an accent. I understand why people want it. And I'll be honest, it's because of Matt Mercer. Matt Mercer just does voices and accents, and everyone wants to do that. And I don't blame them, because Critical Role is a really good game. It's a really good and fun thing to watch. But it's very hard to do it without being disrespectful. And I feel like it's safer and easier just not to do it at all.
Yeah, during the panel, we went over a lot of other things you can do to change your voice besides putting on an accent.
Exactly.
And yeah,
vocabulary. Just use different words. Think about if someone is with the very particular thing of someone who's incredibly rich and privileged and noble or aristocracy versus someone who is maybe more street smart, doesn't have, the words they use and the things they say can paint a picture of where they're from, and you don't have to use an accent for that. And I also want to address the whole, okay, so what if someone is having an accurate portrayal of an accent? The problem still is baggage, emotional baggage. Yep. Even if that person is incredibly has grown up there's actually one or two white actors who I guess they would be Anglo-Indian. They're second generation. They are like born and bred Indians in terms of their upbringing. They speak with an Indian accent. The problem is, without that context, if they were to open their mouth and speak with an Indian accent, the first thing you think is they're mocking us. And it doesn't matter if it's one of those things where they have their own issues to deal with of like, why am I not considered Indian? And I'm not going to get into that thing. But the point is, without that context, you open your mouth and you speak with a very accurate accent, which is not an accent because that's how you speak.
Your voice.
Your voice. People are going to think you're mocking them, and that is not going to go away overnight.
Yeah,
so don't.
100%.
I've stayed kind of quiet so far on this question because I've been chewing on my own thoughts, and I feel, Connie, you're gonna fight me for coddling so much white fragility, but I'm doing it again. And the reason I wanted to spend so time on this, because the question itself makes an assumption, because the question itself says, why are X accents okay? And hard stop there, because that's an assumption. And the reason I want to stop there is because I've had these conversations very, very recently, which sucks, about this whataboutism. It's kind of like, well, you know, I see a lot of oppression of like, I see Oriental stereotypes, but I personally don't care about it until we fix how Eastern Europeans are portrayed in media. And that is a false equivalency. It's also irrelevant, and it's kind of a logical fallacy when you have a conversation. Whataboutism, whatever you want to call it. And it makes an assumption, a very harmful one, that people who speak out about this kind of stuff don't care about other people. Like, I do care that Eastern European cultures like are not oppressed and they are represented well. It just so happens that I can't do that representation. Like, that's not for me to do. But if you care about it, I will support you on it. In fact, I will go on panels and speak for an hour and a half and do the emotional labor, and I will build the vocabulary, and I will help you to build up that strength, and I will support you. But it's not the work for me to do, unfortunately. I wish I could, but I can't, and that's the world we live in. So this question itself, I think, comes from actually a place of a lot of pain. I imagine that someone who asks a question like this is asking it out of their own hurt, and that's valid, and you're allowed to be hurt. But it is irresponsible of you to take that hurt and use it to hurt other people. So again, these questions require a little bit of deconstruction, and it sucks, but it's worth it.
Mm-hmm. So we have almost half an hour left. I have like 2 more things. I mean, I've given you all the questions beforehand. Do you think we could cover the religious rituals topic and then the last topic about diversifying the game, like including non-white things without? Actually, well, I guess we have sort of addressed this one.
So I would say, and this is me speaking first, because I feel like I've spoken last for the last couple of ones, and I'm not trying to just like have the last word in. Yeah, but a lot of the things we've said about accents are part of someone's identity. And I think that is very clear. So when you ask like, how, like, is it okay to portray religious, you know, aspects and things like that of like real world cultures? Religion is also part of identity. So everything we've said about how people feel about their identities, how those identities are used are weaponized to oppress people, that still applies. Except now we're talking about religion. We're talking less about kind of like wealth, not necessarily, but often we're not talking about just like wealth. Here we're talking about something spiritual. So you have to take that extra level of care when thinking about it, because now you might be talking about someone's not just like physical appearance identity or how they sound and like part of their appearance and their presentation, but now you're talking about something that's like even more ethereal, even more hard to grasp, even more divine, if that word resonates with you. And that it can be really tricky. So honestly, I don't fucking do it. I don't touch that. If it's a real world religion, I don't touch that. Well, unless I'm making a statement about that religion, which I've done before.
I think it's also worth noting the difference between living religions and dead religions, because I know there's this whole ancient Greek is like
huge,
prolific in like it's kind of there in every fantasy thing we do. There's some basis in Greek, and I don't know enough about ancient Greek religion and culture to say whether it's living or not. It is not my place. Someone who does will know better. But there's something to be said of you have to be more careful about living religions that are still existent versus something that is dead,
like ancient
and even
Egypt,
then and even then like example. Especially with native stuff, with native and indigenous religions where it was dead due to genocides, that's still kind of iffy.
Yeah, especially like obviously I don't speak for native or indigenous people, but I know that there's a lot of work being done in those communities to revive their cultures after like history, like decades of oppression and genocide and attempted like wiping out of their cultures and whatnot. And so in general, I would stay away from indigenous stuff. just in general, because that's a whole lot of oomph. Like, don't touch that stuff. And I would advise people to go towards go more towards stuff that isn't currently being practiced if you're going to take inspiration from IRL stuff.
So, as a theology minor, I actually have two hot takes here. The first one is, like, if you're creating religious rituals in-game based off of your actual, in real life religious traditions, you probably have enough knowledge to go ahead and do that. The second one is that your game, whatever it is, already has religious rituals based on IRL traditions. Because every game I have consulted for, every game I have played that says it has its own like unique thing, or it's done it's made its religion based on like X ancient culture rather than a real life one or the one of the authors, has been lying to me. Dungeons and Dragons, for example, its pantheon is Christian, split out and abstracted into a roughly polytheistic-ish religion from people who kind of aren't polytheistic and don't quite get how that works. But like, it's Christian and it does Christian rituals in a big way, and largely, like, to the best of my knowledge, basically acceptably. I didn't specialize in Christianity when I was studying theology. I was more concerned with Islam and Hinduism and bunch of other religions. But your game already has religious rituals based off of IRL religions. And the great news, if you're trying to do something and in general, I would be very careful or outright avoid, as Steve said, making religious rituals based off religions you aren't a part of. If you have them in there, you can stick with generalities and keep the tone or a rough approach to religion that the setting uses in general, pour enough and don't go into too much detail so that you don't go into things that will cause problems with religion. Like, if players want to, you may actually just have to say to your players, I don't know enough about Islam to do a big thing about Islam in this game without fucking it up somehow. We're just gonna have to not do that. But your game already has a bunch of stuff based off of IRL religions, and that's probably going to be fine for you. Using that as a guideline will probably work out at least acceptably for you.
I could listen to you talk for like ever. Holy crap. Oh my God.
That's me at y'all. That's actually the real reason why I invited you on this panel. I just like hearing you talk.
I think my opinion on including religion in your games, I do agree with dead religions. I don't want to say free game, because like it obviously, like you said, indigenous religions and stuff like that, they're dead for a very there's a lot of baggage
reason.
there's a lot of baggage to why those are dead. But like things like Greek and Norse and like all of that stuff, which I'll be honest, I'm tired of seeing. I will be honest, I've seen too much of it, but like those are free game. And but if you are trying to include any other religions, I wouldn't include it like even remotely word for word. I wouldn't even like take a religious story and change the names of it. I would try and see what the themes are, because a lot of religions have fairly different themes. Like, so Christianity, for example, if you compare Christianity to it doesn't really count much as a religion, but like voodoo and stuff like that. Christianity and voodoo, their core elements, the core teachings and stuff are very different. The stories they tell and hold are very different. If you can break it down to like, the one I've heard example of is A Hero's Journey is a really general, it's basically the skeleton of what most stories are about. They boil it down to what they call a hero's journey. And then you can add your own fancy elements to it and have at least a backbone that the themes and what it teaches are similar to a real life religion, but the actual thing is as far away from it as you can possibly get without it being like ridiculous. So if you're able to break it down to what the bare bones are, without the religious names, religious texts, and everything like that, and add on the elements of your world and make it make sense as well. Don't give a religion and say these bad people follow this religion. I think that's one of the worst things you can do.
Yeah, don't
ever,
do that.
regardless of if you break it down to the bare minimum. Like, don't do anything like that. But as long as there's no stereotypes attached to it, so like as long as you're not saying like only the savages, which is one that is frequently used, only these barbarians, these savages uses this religion, follow this religion. As long as you're not doing anything like that, I think it's possible to use real life religion at least as just a hint, like a sense,
a jumping off point. I don't know if that's a good phrase.
Yeah. Instead of like for like inspiration, it's more like a sense of just a sense of the religion using.
You're borrowing a small bit.
Yeah.
A tiny bit.
Yeah.
And if you're gonna borrow a bit, borrow themes, like Jack said, borrow the themes. And like, at least for me, like, I'm not gonna get into my whole complicated experiences with religion, but at its core, like, religion aims to teach its followers something, whether and through whatever beliefs they hold. Most religions try to teach you how to be the best person, and however that is defined within each religion. From what I've seen, religions want you to be a good person, and how they teach you to do that, that's kind of how the religion is. And so if you're going to create a religion, I might think about like, what is this trying to teach? Like, what do the followers of this religion, what do they admire? Like, what core traits do they want to bring out in their followers, whatnot, like, and try and go off themes. I think that will help you, maybe.
I would like to add
that's what I was thinking, yeah. The LaCroix.
That comment is so funny.
Memory of fruit.
Yeah,
the whisper of a memory of an echo of fruit.
I've never had LaCroix.
That's a good choice on your part.
That's how I feel. I just want to bring up that I feel like a lot of these questions come from, is this okay? Can I do this? And I feel like maybe that's the wrong approach.
Yeah.
I feel like maybe a better way to frame it is, first of all, like, how would this make the people of color in my life feel if they knew I was doing this, right? Let's be honest here. And the second one would be like, why? Right? I think this has come up across like various speakers. Like, why do you want to do this? The third one is like, I would push you to think, what kind of work would you doing this perform? Like, what kind of work would you creating a religious ritual based off of an aspect of Buddhism, or Zoroastrianism, or Islam? Like, what kind of work would that do? And sort of how Steve's brought up, like, what kind of harm would that perpetuate, if any at all? Like, is it just contained to your Saturday night, like, game night, and like y'all go in and y'all leave and you don't talk about that to anyone else? Like, that is on you, I think, to weigh like the what you're bringing to the table and what you're taking away.
Deconstruct like a 3-year-old. Why?
Yeah. Why? Like,
but why?
Who, what, when, where, why? Like, think about it.
But why? No, really. Yeah. But why?
Yeah,
totally.
Definitely keep asking yourself those questions, and I think like exploring the discomfort and whatnot will help you get to the bottom of like what you're actually trying to do, and I think that will help a lot.
Totally.
At this point, unless anyone has any stuff, Bashir, did you have something?
Not really. I was just kind of reaffirm what Connie said and like consider how much detail do you actually need to go into for your game. It's probably less than you think. You could probably get away with the LaCroix approach.
Bashir is so right. Please don't prep that much, actually.
Yeah, games. Just in general, you don't need to prep that much for games.
Super gonna double down and say that if you want to explore faith, you need to make an RPG about faith. Do not start bringing all these things, because your RPG is gonna suck. Sorry. But like think of like other games that try to like do too many things. They often cause a lot of harm. Then think about those games that just focus on romance or identity, sexual identity, gender identity, all these kind of things. Those are much more impactful games. So 100%, if you want to explore faith, your own faith, and you want to make an RPG about it, absolutely fucking do that. That's beautiful.
Exactly. I think, yeah, I fully agree with what y'all are saying. I would like to open the floor now to audience questions. If anybody has any questions, you can either unmute yourselves or put it in the chat. And yeah, thank you all for listening, and I hope this has been helpful. I hope you got your questions answered to those of you who have sent in questions. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say a quick thank you to all the panelists and for really asking about why we're asking these questions rather than just, here's an easy list of things to do. Okay, now stop thinking about it. Like,
yeah,
that's a good way.
Don't stop thinking about it. Keep thinking about it.
Yeah.
Be that 3-year-old.
What are you doing? Baking a cake. What are you doing? Baking a cake. What are you doing? Baking
But
a cake.
why?
Have you seen that video?
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about? Oh, it's so funny.
But why?
If you haven't seen it, it's like this tiny child. Their dad is like frosting a cake, and the kid keeps asking, "What are you doing?" And the dad just so patiently is just saying, "I'm baking a cake, or I'm frosting a cake. I'm frosting a cake. I'm frosting a cake." And the video is like over a minute long. It's very funny.
I kind of want to say, like, even if, especially if you're white, you know, and you're trying to, I think a lot of this stems from you're sick of like the same boring, like you're like, I get it. I'm sick of it too. I'm sick of the same shit. I get it. I totally understand. But some of the best work, no, like not gonna lie, that I've seen from white artists, whether it's theater makers, is when they turn inward. Like we all have a history. I'm not just China, you know, like I have a specific relationship to my Chineseness that no other Chinese American person has, right? And I think I could say that that's the only generalization I feel okay to make, that every person has a specific relationship to their cultural, ethnic, you know, and familial heritage. I encourage, I implore, I push you to look inward, you know, like my partner is white and they come from like rural New York, you know, and they so much of their art is like about that. Right. And they don't touch like the race stuff. Because first of all, they're like, that's not my story to tell. And second of all, there's so much to mine already. Right. I feel like games are such a rich medium for you to learn about yourself, not necessarily about other people. Right. Because I feel like that, like some people are like, this game helps you learn about other cultures. I'm like, yeah, but really what it's doing is teaching you about how you see other cultures. Right. Not necessarily about how other cultures actually are. So I encourage you to look inward and use that rich material that I promise you is in there to inform your next game, to inform the themes, the setting, you know, the plot, the characters, like the system. If you want to write a game, like go for it. Like that's kind of what I want to like end my thoughts on.
Connie, you just gave me an idea, and that's cool and also terrible because I have like a bajillion game ideas running around my head right now.
Write it down on the notepad.
Yeah, but like it would be so cool if I could figure out how to write a game to do a game about adoption, because I'm adopted and it's something that I don't talk about. Like enough.
Sounds like you should write it down.
Yeah, this sounds like a game I'm interested in.
Yeah.
I like it's just I don't know how to even begin tackling this, because it's a big piece of my identity, but it's something that I really don't talk about because, and I'm not gonna get into this. I could spend another hour talking about this, but like there's so much baggage. There's so much baggage, and like, yeah, wow. All right, y'all give me an idea.
I'd like to also sort of like add to Connie's thing of, you know, like how toxic masculinity is hurtful to men as well. Racism in a similar way hurts white people because it makes them this big monolithic nothingness, which is not true.
Yeah, you have to, like, part of white supremacy is removing everything about you that's not white. But everyone out there is more to you than your whiteness. Like, there is culture, there's familial ties, there's history, there's so many stories about who you are and where you've come from. White supremacy begs you to forget it and to instead replace it with what they define as white, which is fluid and manipulative, and it will eventually, and you will be in that limelight up until the point where you're not, and then it's too late. I really like that comment of like how, you know, I appreciate recognizing that a lot of these questions needed more deconstruction, because on hell sites where there might be birds, you will see oftentimes where people will say things like, but how is that racist? And that is a terrible question to ask someone, because it implies that like there's a checklist. Like there's things like where I can point it out. Like I can point at like the brick in the building that's weak and be like, that's the racist brick and you got to replace that. It's much deeper than that. And I wish it wasn't. I truly do. But that's not the world we live in. Turns out that when you build for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of oppression, you can't just remove one or two bricks.
Yeah.
Sometimes the issue is the building rather than any given brick.
Sometimes you just demolish the building. No, you know what? I take that back. That could be taken out of context. Sometimes you need to just really deconstruct your own thoughts.
We're gonna claim just that one sentence, Steve, and it's gonna
blow up a building, y'all.
I'm okay with some buildings being demolished, because then maybe we can make nicer buildings.
I already have enough problems at airports. I don't need to go on the record.
No kidding, right?
Washington Dulles Airport can.
Oh, God.
I just want to say that like probably the most useful piece of advice, like among all of the really invaluable advice tonight, was you don't need to prep as many details as you think you do. Because I'm definitely one of those people that like over prepares, and I'm like, oh my God, they're right. I don't have to prep everything. I only have to produce surface material because my players probably won't even touch any of that.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, that's something I learned the hard way when I started GMing. I was writing down everything, and then like I ended up using like not much of it. And then I started DMing a different game, and that game I had like no notes, and it ended up being a lot easier to GM because I wasn't being held back by, oh, but I wrote this down and this needs to make it in the game because I wrote it down. And I went in there with no notes. I improv'd everything. And then I was furiously writing down during the session so I could remember all the stuff that I was making canon. But yeah, definitely prep less.
So here's
stress too.
Here's Steve's life hack, and it is when you need to like make those details, don't and ask a player to do it, because if you put a player on the spot and they're comfortable with it, they're gonna use their own identity to start peppering it in there, and you will then one not have to talk about it anymore because they're the expert now, but two, you'll get a lot of value out of that, because the way most tabletop RPGs are set, you have like this disparity of power where the GM has the most power and the players really have smaller amounts of power to that. But if you give them the reins, be like, oh, you've come to this temple and you know what? I don't know what religion they practice. Y'all, what religion do you think they practice? And like, what does it look like? And like, what does it smell like? What do you hear out of that temple? Oh, these are good questions. These are real good questions. And I promise you their games will they will feel different. I'm not going to say better or worse. My opinion is my own, but they're going to feel like a lot different.
I've been advocating for this ever since I realized that the GM doesn't have to be the person that makes up everything. I saw this homebrew rule. It was in the context of D&D, but you could use it for any game. And it's called I Know a Guy. And it's something you give your players where they can say at any time when they're trying to solve a problem or just whatever, that their character, oh, I know a guy. And then they get to make up an NPC on the spot that becomes a real person that, I mean, you can force your GM to play this person, but
that's actually an improv game too called Here Comes Steve, where players do a scene about Steve and they set Steve up, right? Like, oh, he always talks like this, he walks like this, he's got problems with his wife, and then Steve has to come on and embody all these things at once and then leave the scene. So I feel like this could be a great comedic exercise too, like for your roleplay session.
Oh, I know a guy. Yeah, for sure.
Your players could really fuck with you and be like, oh, and Steve has a Scottish accent that sounds really good. Especially if they know you can't do one.
Drac is like, no, worst nightmare, no.
And force you to do an accent.
There are some other RPGs coming out. I think Cortex is one of them, where part of the game is not fully finishing your character sheet. You can leave things like blank and fill them in the middle of the game. So you can be like, actually, like, I am a great hacker, and here's why I'm a great hacker.
Fate does that as well.
That's so cool.
Definitely, like, we talked a lot about Elf Game, but definitely like there's like other stuff out there. Elf Game comes with so much baggage, and I'm not gonna say it's good or bad because I play D&D. I have a D&D game that's been running for like years and years and years, and I've been a DM for like over a decade, and it's a great game and I love it. But there's so much more out there. Don't just watch rom-coms, watch other movies too. I promise you'll enjoy them.
There's a really great game called This Ship Will Carry Us Home, written by Hans, and I cannot remember his last name.
Oh yeah.
Chun,
Does
I
anyone
think.
Chun? Is it Chun?
I think so.
Yeah. But it's called This Ship Will
yeah.
Carry Us Home. And the core like mechanic of this game is that you get to like make up memories that will help solve problems. So like I can't remember how many memories you start the game off, but like basically the GM presents you with problems, and then you through your character, you say, oh, well, I have this memory, and you make up a memory of something that your character has remembered, and then that memory helps you solve the problem. But that's a great example of like making stuff up in the moment. It's a great game too. You should play it.
Yeah. You know, I definitely highly recommend playing like other games other than D&D. And I feel like even that can help with a lot of these questions you asked, because a lot of these, if you put them into D&D, would be so much worse than if you put it into like any other, like any most Powered by the Apocalypse games, for example. Like Powered by the Apocalypse doesn't have so much lore, and it's hard to say lore, but lore that's built on a lot of baggage. It just doesn't tend to have that, so it's a lot easier to just carry things over into those kind of games. And some games are quite literally built for whatever theme you're trying to investigate or go through. Like I think, like Steve said, if you want to have a game about faith, D&D is not that game. Don't explore that in D&D, because that is a game about, it's literally a crusade game. And if you're going to bring faith into that, you are going to be oppressing like there is
it's a war game that got turned into
the
Lord of the
game.
Rings.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think the thing to note is that know what the game you're playing is about and know how that's going to interact with whatever you're bringing in. So like if you're playing a game about, like, if you're playing D&D, you're playing a game about adventure and violence on some level. Like, this is what the mechanics are going to push you to do. And so if you're bringing in other cultures or other faiths, you can do that, but be careful of where you put it. Because if you put it, like, on the side of the things you are stabbing, you automatically have a problem. And if you put it somewhere else, that's problem. Like, if you put it in friendly towns, this is what the people here are doing, that's probably not as much of a problem. Similarly, if you're playing like Bluebeard's Bride, a game about, you know, abusive relationships and like a bunch of stuff like that, and like gendered horror, etc., also be very careful what you're doing with religion, because that could very quickly go to really dark places.
You play, as someone who is running a lot of Bluebeard's Bride games, religion is 99.9% being used to add to that gendered violence and feminine horror. So if you're trying to show religion in a good light, I'm sorry, that's not the game for you.
Pick another one.
Yeah.
There's so many games out there.
Everything that is in Bluebeard's Bride is to help add to the feminine horror. This game is supposed to make you uncomfortable. It's supposed to give you a space to deal with the trauma of gendered horror.
Yeah, like just play other games and you'll see, like, honestly, playing other games will answer, or at least make a lot of these questions easier to answer.
Definitely.
Yeah. Like D&D was my first game. It wasn't my first TTRPG I watched, but it was my first game I played. And once I played another game, my second game was actual Cannibal Shia LaBeouf. It was a fucking stupid game.
That was a fun game.
The story it told was so drastically different to what I could ever have been told in D&D.
Yep.
Like it makes a huge difference. So honestly, there are like Ryutama. Ryutama is a very different game from D&D, and it tells a very different story that D&D most likely could never tell unless you severely homebrew it, and at that point, it's not D&D anymore. So you might as well just play Ryutama.
D&D can't do everyone is John.
But everyone is John could do D&D.
Could we though?
Well, John could be a D&D player trying to go through their own
Oh,
game.
God.
Oh my
That's so
God.
funny.
That is too
What a
much.
concept.
That is too meta. I'm gonna think about that though.
Anyway, so it is 9:32. If anyone has any closing statements or something to leave this wonderful panel audience with closing thoughts, if you have a closing thought, and then you could tell everybody where to find you on Twitter or other social media, yeah, some kind of closing out thing. I'm a great moderator tonight, y'all.
I will go first again. Let's
All
do
right,
this again.
Steve, go.
Extra reading for you. So you want to talk about Race by Ojime Olu. Mispronouncing it, but that's okay. It's a really, really wonderful book. We talked a lot about deconstructing your own biases and where these things come from. This, I think, is very, very helpful for helping to frame that in a way that will make you uncomfortable. But this book, in my opinion, will try really hard to be patient with you with a lot of stories. So I think this is a really, really good one. I've already talked about Unbreakable. I'm going to recommend that once you read this book, you take a look, if you're a D&D player, at Tasha's Culture and Everything, and think about how they've tried to do certain things and tried to see where they might have missed the mark, and then just sit on that. Those are my closing remarks. You can catch me on Twitter at DEEM Steve. That's DEM Steve phonetically. The DM stands for slide in my DMs and talk to me about Avatar. You can also catch me on Asians Represent, AZNS Represent on Twitter. We're also on Twitch as AZNS Rep, where we talk about this kind of stuff a lot, and we do a lot of deconstructions. We recently finished a critical read of Oriental Adventures. Then we went into Legend of the Five Rings, and Mary will talk about it, but we are also hosting an Al-Qadim critical read, and we're also critical reading Kara Tour. Whew, we're busy.
Ooh, that's a lot. Thank you so much, Steve. Anyone would like to go next?
I mean, I'll go next.
All right, Drac, go.
Yeah, hi. I've been Drac. My extra reading. I don't have any extra reading other than read other game systems. You can literally, I often do this. I quite literally think of a theme I want in the game, and I just Google TTRPGs about this, and like there's a whole bunch of them. There's a ton of indie TTRPGs. Itch.io is amazing for indie TTRPGs that touch on things that like AAA companies wouldn't do, or just don't find financially beneficial until it becomes a trend to do. Because unfortunately, that does seem to be the only pushing factor for big companies to make any change. I'm on Twitter at Draconics. That's DRAKONIQUES. The normal spelling of it was taken, so I had to get creative with it. So I'm very sorry in advance. But yeah, no, I just do want to end with the fact that you're asking these questions at all is honestly really good. There's a lot of people who are very much set in their ways and refuse to learn or refuse to accept that they're in the wrong at all. So keep asking these questions, keep thinking and meditating and looking in on yourself to ask why you want to do these things in the first place. And just tell fun stories as well. Yeah, that's it.
Heck yeah. Who would like to go next?
I'm Bashir Gauss. You can find my independent RPG works at havocfet.itch.io. And you can find me on Twitter at Bashir Gauss, spelled like my name. The last name is Ghouse. I don't have any more recommended reading for you all. I do second Steve's recommendation in terms of reading. It's a great book, especially for this topic. And yeah, have a great night.
You're muted.
I can go next. So Steve has inspired me to very quickly pull up a bunch of further reading that I highly recommend, that I've read all of these before, and I highly recommend them before I do a sign off. So in order, I think it's important as players, as game designers, as actors to read a wealth of different kinds of things, not just games, to sort of broaden your horizons and deepen your knowledge of craft. So the first book I'd like to put forward that I think folks should read is a novel called The Sympathizer by Viet Thanh Nguyen. And it's a fictional novel about the Vietnam War. And it talks about Orientalism, about memory. And there's a character in it that I think, is like a white professor of Oriental studies that I think will resonate across who we've encountered before. The next text I would like to propose that folks read, if you haven't read already, is Toni Morrison's Playing in the Dark, Whiteness in the Literary Imagination. This is sort of like a critical race studies 200 course text. And I'll put all of these in the chat too, so y'all can look them up. It's exactly what it says on the tin. It's about ways we imagine Blackness, especially from a white perspective, in media, in books, in literature. And this I think applies for games as well. And Toni Morrison says a lot of really good shit in this. The next book I would like to put forward is called Ways of Seeing by John Berger. It basically questions how we look at things, from a fundamental perspective. You probably know this quote from it. You painted a naked woman and you gave her a mirror and you called it vanity, right? But really what you were doing was showing, that you lusted after women. This is like a man talking to a man, right? So it really it helps untangle a lot of really difficult conversations, I think, that have come up during this panel, and help reframe it in a very clear and I think academic context about how does the way we look at things, how does our own positionality and lack of self-reflexivity affect the way we perceive things, the way we are even able to begin to perceive things. The next text, and this is a personal favorite of mine because it's written by one of my college professors, is called Speculative Imperialism's Monstrosity and Masquerade in Post-Racial Times. It's by Susanna Losa. She's great. It explores the settler colonial ideologies underpinning what makes a monster. This is relevant, I think, when it comes to monsters in D&D. What monsters are you running in your games? What makes a monster? Are any of your monsters steepled in caricature or racism or stereotypes? This is a great, and it talks about post-racialism too. This idea of we live in a post-racial society, girl power, but girl power, the Secretary of State is a woman, but we're still bombing other countries. That sort of logic. That's the context that this text is written in. Another book I recommend is a lot of you are probably familiar. It's called This Bridge Called My Back. It's written by radical women of color, and it's just a collection of statements. This Bridge Called My Back. Okay. Writings by radical women of color, and it's just a collection of queer, trans, women of color talking personal essays about basically intersectionality and their perspectives, and I think it's really valuable. The next text I recommend is the 1977 Combahee River Collective Statement by the Combahee River Collective, who were a collective of radical Black feminists, and about this is just their mission statement, and I think you could pull a lot of good, interesting shit from that. And the last two, I promise, there's only two more. The second to last one is called Braiding Sweetgrass. By Robin Wall Kimmerer, and she is an indigenous botanist, and it is basically about the languages and the knowledges of plants and the natural world that in this settler colonialist state has been lost to many settlers, including myself and everyone here who isn't indigenous. And it's worth looking at too. And the last text I would like to recommend is The Malevolent Volume by Justin Philip Reed, who is a queer Black poet. And this is a book of poetry about the myths and transformations of Black being and what it means to be monstrous, what it means to be sublime. So if you're thinking about divinity, if you're thinking about ways that language can shape our perception of divinity and monstrosity, this book of poetry is the one for you. So that's your homework for the week. Read it all.
Yeah. Fuck yeah.
It was so
I'll post
funny.
it in chat.
I actually posted all of them as you were speaking. I was Googling them as fast as I could. Yeah. It was so funny. Steve pulled out a book and I saw your computer light turn on. And I was like, oh,
yep. I was
something
I'm whitewashed. I'm being beamed up right now. But yeah, those are all the texts I recommend.
Beam me up.
Beam me up, Scotty.
Engage.
And as a sign out, I have been Connie. My pronouns are they, he, and she. You can find me on Twitter at @byConnieChong. By like the authorial sign off, not the sexuality, though I am both. I am also the GM and executive producer beyond Transplanar RPG. As trans like transgender, and planar as in interplanar travel, PLANAR RPG on Twitter. And we stream Saturdays at 3 p.m. Central US time on Twitch. We'd love to have you join us. And yeah, I believe the only person who hasn't outroed next aside from Nala is Miriam, right?
Yep.
Cool.
That would be me. All of those books are pretty cool, although I can only speak for how to talk about race, because that's so you want to talk about race, because that is on my list of to reads, but I definitely am interested in checking all of those out. I have 2 books I would add to that big list. So one is called Inglorious Empire, how the British, what the British did to India by Shashi Tharoor. It is, I like to put that in there because there is a lot about South Asian history, especially with the British Raj, that has warped the idea of what India is, because India is only what is now modern India, and that is also equated with the ancient cultures, which honestly, it's not India, it's a literal subcontinent. And there's a whole tweet thread I did about why I write Serzamin and what South Asia means, which I'm not going to get into now. But that's a very good book to read if you're into more South Asian, trying to, but specifically how what the British Raj did and what it took. And the other book, which I recently read sometime last year, is Stamped from the Beginning, by Ibram X. Kendi, which is a really good book about racism, anti-Blackness, and how to work towards being anti-racist. Yes. And with that, I am Mariam. I go by they, them pronouns, and you can find me on Twitter at media_junkie. I have a history on why that name is there, but now is not the time.
Thank you all so much for coming to this panel. These 5 people are absolutely lovely. Thank you all for your time. I hope everyone watching right now and everyone watching later has learned something. For people in the actual club, I will put all these books in our panel archives chat, so that y'all can look them up. I definitely will be looking some of these up. I struggle with reading, being someone who has ADHD, but I'm gonna try, because these all sound
Audiobooks.
Amazing. Oh, that's even worse for me. That's even worse. Oh God, I wish audio mediums weren't so difficult for me. But yes, I will definitely be checking these out. I unfortunately do not have any additional reading, because I read exactly 1 book last year, and it was a fantasy novel called Priory of the Orange Tree. It was very good. But anyway, I'm on Twitter at Nalawu. I do art stuff and I yell about games and whatnot. And yeah, thank you all for coming. And I'm gonna pause the recording now.